Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. If you want to leave a comment, we always check our comments. And most of all, check www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com. All kinds of information there. Remember, October 25th, 26th, 27th this year in 2024. Dutch Hunter Rendezvous down at the Don's Base Camp. Information you can find here on our YouTube channel and on our website. Or you can go to Dutch Hunter Rendezvous on Facebook and find information. That being said and done, let's move forward. This story, interesting story. The last time I saw anything published about it was probably 1969. I wasn't that familiar with it, but sometimes you pick something up and you kind of catch on to it. And the story is about a gentleman named George R. Kasner. He had come from California around 1876, 1875, and he had come out and brought sheep, and he was sheep herding, sheep farming up by Flagstaff. He had an allotment out there, south of Flagstaff, or kind of southwest, I think, the area of Kasner Mountains, which is named after him. Anyways, he settled in there, started herding his sheep and doing his sheep. After the first group of sheep worked through, he bought some cattle, and he kept buying cattle up. Finally deciding in the first year that the cattle was probably a better livestock for him to run up there. So he ended up selling out all his sheep, and they got shipped to California to some other group. And he became basically a cattle rancher from that time forward. One of the guys who worked for him was a gentleman named Andy McGuire, who had come out into Arizona around the 1870s, so came up into Flagstaff from San Pedro and worked cattle in a number of places and ended up working with Carson. So as the story goes, old George would do very, very well. He was very successful, very shrewd, paid fairly. And he would go into town, and he would only accept payment in gold or cash. It was he did not take any credit, and he left nothing at the bank. He would just cash in, take his money with him, and leave. Everyone kind of knew he had something stashed somewhere, but no one had a clue where. He prospered very, very well, and by 1883, pretty short period of time, he had accumulated enough wealth, he decided to retire. So they were doing a big cattle roundup in 1883. And when McGuire went up to settle up for after the roundup, he paid him his wages and said, here's a little extra. I'm retiring. I'm not going to bring any more cattle in. I'm going back to California. I'm done with this. And McGuire said, you must have done really well. And he said, yeah, I'm going to clear some of the gold and stuff I had out and head to California. And McGuire basically asked him, do you need security or someone to go with you to kind of keep an eye out for you? Because George was a bit elderly. And he said, no, I've taken care of myself and I can handle my own, so no worries, but thanks for, offering the help. And he went on his way. The next couple of years, McGuire showed up in Flagstaff. Not McGuire, I'm sorry, Carson. And he shows up into Flagstaff, and he goes to the banker and cashes in some more gold and stuff, or some paper money and stuff. And McGuire's kind of curious, and the banker says, yeah, sometimes he comes in, he makes several trips, spends a few weeks here, and he said he seems to have forgotten where he's kept some of the money. I guess he didn't draw a map. It was all by memory. And when he's going out to his old cabin and his old ranch, he's trying to remember these places where he's kept it all. He said, but most of the time he comes in at several $1,000s or so forth. Then he leaves again. The next 6 months, a year later, he shows up again. And then finally, after a few years, word comes back that he had passed away in California, and they never heard from him anymore. Well, the story takes a funny turn because three cowboys are coming through the area and they're out by the old ranch. And before they get into Flagstaff, they're coming up the Mooney Trail up through there. And they decide to stop off and have a campfire and stay the night before they make the rest of the trip into Flag. And they're sitting there and there's an old tree that's struck by lightning, and they go chopping some wood off of it, some dead wood off to make a fire. And one of the guys is chopping the wood and hears something funny in the wood. When he chops some of the wood up, he finds there's a bunch of coins, a couple coins. He starts chopping more up and finds more and more coins. What they had discovered was that someone had bored a hole in the tree and then been putting gold coins down in it. And then they had plugged it back up. So they ended up cutting the whole tree down. They ended up getting about $1,000 out of that tree. They came into town, they're at the saloon, they're telling everybody about it. Said, we looked around, couldn't find any other trees like that. But that was pretty cool. And so the word got around that that's what Kasner's deal was. He was putting his golden trees and stuff in the surrounding area. So McGuire went over and talked to them, said, I used to work for our old man Carson. And they talked for a while, but they didn't have anything specific. They said there was this tree had been struck by lightning. So McGuire decides to go out to the Kasner Ranch and take a look around. He finds the tree where the lightning was, and the guys had chopped it up, and he looks at it, and then he looks around for several other trees. He finds several other trees that have plugs. He said it was very, very hard to pick them out. What Kasner had done is augured out a piece of the tree, then put his coins or bills, because I guess he put bills in some of them, and then he'd plug it back up and then carefully go over it so that the bark there'd be a piece of bark there, and then it would grow back in eventually, and only he would know. You couldn't physically tell on the tree where he had been putting this gold. So McGuire starts looking several times. He's working for the Rogers Cattle Company up by Rogers Lake at that point, and he ends up, after working for them, he's drifting into the old Kasner area, and when they decide to take a break and they're going to let the cowboys go, he's offered a job where he can stick in the area, pick up stray and drifting cattle and stuff and bring them back over. So I realized this is a good deal. He's going to make a little money on the side, but he can actually have an excuse to be out there searching for the stuff from Kasner. So he goes out. Some people start hearing the word about it. He has a group of men that come through one time, ask him about gold and treasure out there. He said he's never heard of it. Tells him to go out by Sycamore Canyon. He's heard of a treasure story of a mine over there, but nothing in that area. He said sees even very little quartz in the area. They eventually move on. He eventually does find some of the trees. Now he's finding more and more of the trees that have the bores in them, and he's occasionally finding some coins. But he also finds a lot of trees that have no coins left in them. So he's having to figure, did Kasner clear these out, or does someone else out there? So he's keeping an eye out and trying to be very attentive to everything in the details. He sets himself up. He sets himself up in the old Kasner shack, and he's just out there. Nobody's paying him no mind. Well, he goes into Flag, and he cashes in one of his, when he finds one of the trees, he finds some bills, and he goes in and puts that in the bank. He's heading back out, and a snowstorm hits. On his way in, the snowstorm is very bitter. He gets to the cabin, he gets in, gets a fire lit, and then the door comes crashing open, and two men come in. One of them is a man named Doug Hall. And the two men come in, and they're like, hey, this storm's really bad. We couldn't believe we saw this cabin. We were passing through. Do you mind if we stay and all? He didn't know what to say. He didn't really want them there, but you can't push him back out in the storm because it was a blizzard, literally. So he said, put your horses up, and there's some grain, and you can stay, till the storm clears out. Next day, the storm's cleared up, but the snow's still real high. So they decided to stay another day. He's cooking for them. He's trying to kind of watch his supplies because he only has enough supplies for him, but now there's three of them eating. And they're not doing much to help out. In fact, he finds out they're giving their horses more grain than they should, doubling up the grain. And he tries to be polite to them and says, look, I don't care if you're staying here, but we're not going to make it if you keep doing this. And they get a little argumentative. and things start to get tense. Well, the next day or so, they still haven't left, and he's saying, don't you think you boys should be on your way and all? And the other man, who's never named in the story, not Doug Hall, but the other man, basically says, what, you trying to push us out of here? We heard you've been out here for Kasner's gold, and we've heard that you've been in town cashing in and coming in with gold and bills. So you must know where some of this treasure is. We're out here. Where are you keeping it? What are you doing? Now, fortunately, he wasn't keeping it there in his cabin, but things got super, super tense, and so then finally he had to grab his rifle and force them out the door with their horses, because he told them, look, you got to get out of here, and he realized, damn, that was close. That wasn't good. He needed to really watch his back now. But it didn't really work, because the next day he was cooking and nowhere near his rifle, and the two men came barging back in. They ended up taking him down, tying him to a chair, and then basically just asking him questions about all this stuff. And where's the gold? Where did you find it? And all this. But he won't tell them nothing. He says, I got no gold. I've just been living out here. I work on the roundups, and and until the spring comes, I just settle in here. And then in the spring, I deer hunt, and I live out here. And then the springtime, summer, I'll work with the cattle companies. And he says, then I go back, and that's what I do. That's what I'm here. I don't have anything. And they're not buying it. They kind of start to torture him a bit and all, but then they finally realize they're neither of them, I guess, can cook. So they untie him to allow him to cook. He's cooking. Things get heated after a couple days between the other two, and one day there's enough of a distraction that he's able to grab the other man and get his pistol away from him. Before the other man, Doug Hall, can get his pistol out. He makes him give up his pistol. He basically ties them up, goes out, gets all the horses, puts them on the horse and gets them on the horses, and then takes them into Flagstaff to Deputy Sheriff Brogdon. When he comes in, he's telling Brogdon, these men have been coming in there, what was going on. They held me hostage and all this, tried to rob me, but I didn't have anything. But Brogdon's actually more interested in the horses he brought, because the other two horses were stolen out of Flagstaff. And so these men were charged with the robbery and hostage or kidnapping of McGuire, but they also for this theft of the horses, which was probably a more severe penalty. So this all occurs. He's finally got that settled and all, but he tells Brogdon kind of what's been going on. Says, I've been going out there, and there's a lot of trees. I've been several miles from the house and still occasionally find a tree. And he explained to him how hard it's been, how he's had to try to patch the trees up because he doesn't want anybody to know which ones he's checked or what to really look for. And he explains this whole theory and this whole story. Brogdon never went and was very interested. McGuire drifted out of there with his money eventually. But Brogdon did tell some of his nephews, the Pierce brothers, or cousins, about the whole story, and they continued to look. And then one of their sons continued to look. And they would continue to find probably some of the same trees that McGuire had found that have the auger holes and are patched up, and they started marking them. I guess there was a certain mark that McGuire was leaving on trees if he knew what to look for, so they started realizing, okay, this tree's been checked. But they continued. I think at one point they found about $1,000 in one tree of bills. So they were still, but there was nothing ever really found significant in again. So it's not sure whether or not Kasner got most of it, and McGuire we don't know how much McGuire got because he left no overall number. But that's the Kasner Mountains story. So if you're ever up in there or near the Kasner Mountains and you're near the Kasner Ranch site, you might want to kind of take a look around at some old trees. And I don't know, maybe a metal detector or something, start detecting on the trees, because one of the trees might ring. And if that tree rings, what you're going to find in there are probably somewhere between $500 and $1,000 worth of gold coins from the 1870s. Who knows what they'd be worth now. So I thought that was an interesting story. Plenty of names to go by. I hadn't seen the story told many other times. So I thought it was an interesting series of events with names and dates and things. And I looked up, and I know who Brogdon was, but I was able to look and see who these other individuals were. And I thought, that's pretty interesting, you know. And it does make sense. He was augering out the trees. Good place to store your gold rather than bury it. I guess you just should have made a map. So that's the story of the Kasner Mountains gold, or they call it also, it's referred to generally as the $1,000 tree, because those three guys found $1,000 in the one tree that had been struck by lightning. So if you're ever up in that area, and I think it's kind of southeast of Sycamore Canyon, give a look around. Maybe you got up to a tree, and I said, if you got a metal detector or pinpointer, maybe it's gonna light up on that tree, and you might pay for your trip that way. So there you go. That was Chasing Legends this week. I hope you're enjoying it. We're going to be moving into October and our spooky stories now. So we only got 3 or 4 of them for October. It's a short month on Mondays, but we'll cover those, and we'll have those for you before we return to our other normal Chasing Legends program. But in between then, and right during that time period, remember the Dutch Hunter Rendezvous. Friday night's big show up. We'll have a campfire and everything. And then Saturday night, we'll have the guest speakers out in the amphitheater. So I hope you come out. You're more than welcome to. It's free. Bring water, bring firewood, bring food. We do have toilet facilities, and they'll be open. So thank you so much for watching Chasing Legends week to week. And until the next time, always remember the most important thing. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.